Hello and welcome to another video by your friend Matthew Sherling. So something I've been doing lately is having very energetic dialogues with ChatGPT about various subjects. And I'm having a blast, I can't lie, I'm having a blast doing it. And for each of the subjects, that I really kind of dive into with ChatGPT, I end up creating a Google Doc to kind of house my notes and my reflections, and I copy and paste the dialogues in there, and it's been really fun. So one of those subjects and one of those documents is what I've been calling transversal visions of the adjacent future. And one way to describe this is basically, mapping out some sort of utopian vision. Or you could say, I'm using my imagination and my own values to envision and map out a version of contemporary society, specifically in the United States, since that's where I've lived the most and that's what I'm most intimately familiar with. But it can be, it could apply beyond that, especially because a big component is fractals, Everything's kind of fractally reflected from big to small in this vision. But yeah, I find it fun to do this for one, and it kind of refines my own understanding of my values and my principles and what I would, what I wish the world were more like, basically. And that's been a very interesting experiment. And it's also, kind of energizing me to do what I can in my own small ways in my own life, to kind of bring some of these things into my own direct reality in one way or another. So there are many ways, many entry points into talking about this subject. The entry point that I'm going to use today is to kind of just briefly introduce the 7 guiding pillars of this vision of a redesigned society. I probably will end up kind of making a separate video for each of these pillars and go deeper into them. But for now, I'll keep it somewhat brief. Okay, so the first pillar is transversality itself, right? These are transversal visions. I know I use that word a lot, but it's a very helpful word, and it does a lot. So I've kind of defined transversality as the practice or condition of fulfilling multiple criteria at once. And so having that as kind of a guiding pillar or guiding principle, that would mean that all of the structures and systems and operations and decisions and actions of this collective would use transversality as a criteria, when making decisions and designing things. One big living question would be, is this transversal? In what ways is it transversal? What are the multiple criteria that this decision or action or structure, what are the multiple criteria that it is fulfilling, right? So transversality, that's number 1. Number 2, and I'm not really kind of creating a hierarchy of pillars here, so I don't pay too much attention to the order. I'm just kind of saying them as I remember the pillars. So second pillar is pragmatism. And pragmatism, the way I think about pragmatism, influenced by William James, is basically assessing, in this context, it would be assessing the value or success of any given decision or action or structure based on the consequences of it. I mean, I guess that seems obvious, right? You would think that we're always doing that, but not necessarily, you know. Shining a more specific light on pragmatism, I think, would be really helpful. It's looking at the consequences, you know, it's looking at the fruit of our decisions and actions and structures. And then this, you know, applies to the third one that I'm going to mention, which is adaptability, right? Adaptability and pragmatism go hand in hand. It's like we need to be willing to constantly adapt our system based on the consequences, you know, and adjusting in order to have better consequences and have better outcomes and have better fruit, right? So transversality, pragmatism, adaptability. The fourth one I'll mention is transversal wellness as a pillar, right? And transversal wellness, so one way that this wellness would be transversal is, I mean, when we're looking at the human being, we're thinking about physical wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness, and even spiritual wellness. You know, I wouldn't necessarily want to bring spirituality into these pillars in a super duper explicit or off-putting way for people who don't, you know, consider themselves spiritual or don't really care about spirituality proper or something like that. So that would be hovering there as a kind of a subcomponent of this wellness. But definitely, you know, physical wellness and making a point to have a transversal healthcare system and, you know, access, healthcare access for all individuals in the collective. And yeah, so kind of coming up with all sorts of ways to enhance healing and wellness of all sorts, you know. So paying attention to food, for example, you know, and kind of putting more effort into having a physically healthy society when it comes to food and when it comes to exercise, consumption of all sorts, really, right? Food consumption, media consumption, all the things we consume on our phones, right? So having more mindful consumption in various ways, putting emphasis on transversal, you know, therapy when necessary, and yeah, you know, having an emphasis on mental hygiene and mental wellness, right? The next one I will mention is transversal education, right? And kind of a complete redesign of the education system, and, you know, making it possible for people to dive into their actual interests as early as possible, and utilizing transversal tools for education, including technology, of course, and AI, and in ways that we have found to be healthy and time well spent, and, you know, fostering independent thinking and exploration versus closing those possibilities, right? So transversal education, and kind of teaching beyond the subjects that are usually the core subjects. You know, I mean, I would want to keep those in the education system, but offer a bunch of other types of learning, from emotional intelligence, right, to practical skills, financial literacy. You know, we could come up with all the different subjects that are relevant to us and kind of fold them in addition to subjects that we're used to having in school. So yes, transversal education, transversal subjects and transversal tools for education, and transversal access to education as well. The sixth one I will mention is participation. And so, I would want this to be a democratic society, and I would encourage various kinds of participation, from big kind of, interesting town hall-esque, public discourse events that could break out into small groups and one-on-one kind of Socratic dialogue, and all sorts of meaningful dialogue and discussion events. And young folks, like little kids, are invited to do this, and kind of this collective sharing of ideas and open forum, that sort of thing, right? And then this society would have certain initiatives that I've thought about. One initiative is what I've been calling the Fresh Initiative, and that is the Fresh Initiative would be designed for like eco-sustainability and greening urban spaces, and kind of just trying to have transversal sustainability and that sort of thing. And I guess I definitely should mention under wellness. I'm sorry I didn't get to this. I was focusing mainly on the types of wellness for the human being. But another kind of wellness for sure that I would focus on to make it more transversal is, the wellness of the planet, the wellness of the environment and nature, right? And that would be straight up one of the big aspects of the wellness, the wellness pillar. And this initiative, the Fresh Initiative, would be designed to really kind of address all of those things. And so with the different initiatives, just thinking about the Fresh Initiative is one option, but there would be several initiatives. And these initiatives would be really robust and would have, would have funding and would offer jobs. And so one idea I've had is that, one way of navigating homelessness and immigration is to offer the option to immigrants and homeless people to work for one of these initiatives as a way of kind of integrating into society. And that's a whole different, that's a big topic in itself. But that's part of the participation, right? Transversal participation. So that would be a pillar. And number 7 is living systems modeling. This is something I've been trying to learn more and more about lately. There's a podcast called the Great Simplification Podcast with Nate Hagans, and I really enjoy it. You should check it out. It's related to this. I mean, it's looking at what he calls, I think, the meta crisis, all the different crises that are happening in the world today, and looking at them in a transversal way and a holistic way. It's a very informative, very interesting, very enlightening podcast. But I listened to an episode of that a few weeks ago, and the guest was talking about regenerative economics. And it was all about modeling our economic system, modeling it on living systems. And so I've been trying to learn more and more about all of the dynamics and the attributes of living systems. And I think it's genius, He was his breakdown of how his reasoning and the impact it might have to model our economic system on living systems. And I, of course, took that in a transversal way, and I'm like, what are ways that we can model all of our systems on living systems, right? And, yeah, that's number 7, and I think that would be fantastic and really creative and experimental, and it could be using science in this really imaginative way, and I think it'd be wonderful. So those are my 7 pillars for my transversal visions of the adjacent future. What are yours? Let me know in the comments. And until next time, peace out.